Welcome back, everybody. We have Kari Albarado at East Tennessee State University. How you doing?
I'm doing good. How are you, Dr. Bradley?
I'm doing very well. It's so weird, and I've told people this before. People I knew, from previous life, I guess you'd say, is for them to say that. Anyway, thank you. So you're at East Tennessee State. What do you do there? What's your title?
Yeah,
Where you at?
yeah. So at East Tennessee State University, I serve as the Director of Campus Recreation. We have a comprehensive campus recreation department that includes 5 program areas of aquatics, outdoor adventure, sport programs, operations, and fitness and wellness. And we are a Division I university with an enrollment of approximately 14,000 students. We're located in Johnson City, Tennessee. So if you've ever heard the song Wagon Wheel, and it talks about, headed west from the Cumberland Gap to Johnson City, Tennessee, we actually are in Johnson City, Tennessee.
And you
And
gotta.
I suggest the Old Crow Medicine Show version of that song. I
That's what
mean,
I was gonna say. You got to go with the original, right?
no offense to Darius and Hootie, but
Yeah,
Old Crow Medicine shows where it's at when it comes to that song.
absolutely. So, to before we get kind of more into the weeds of what you do there, why don't we kind of backtrack? Where are you originally from?
Yeah, so I grew up in a community, not even a town, a community called Slant, Virginia. You might be able to find one or two pieces on Google about it, but it's located outside of a town called Fort Blackmore, Virginia. And that is in the southwest part of the state of Virginia. The piece with that is it's really where Virginia and Tennessee comes together. When we're talking, with people outside of this area in this region, I always ask people like Bristol, NASCAR, there's a racetrack there. Well, we're just over from that. So it's really kind of outside of the Tri Cities, which are actually in Tennessee, but it's a community outside of there. I grew up on a farm, a tobacco farm,
Okay.
actually, in the middle of the Appalachian Mountains. And that is the correct pronunciation, which I'm sure folks in Arkansas know that. But grew up in the heart of the Appalachian Mountains on a farm. That's where I'm from. And that's really located about 45 minutes from where I work now at ETSU.
Yeah, you kind of come full circle. So, being that you're in campus recreation, were you involved in sports from a young age, or did you kind of develop that as you got into as you grew up a little bit?
Yeah, I grew up playing sports. I mean, there's not a lot to do on the farm besides shoot basketball and take care of some cows. I grew up playing sports, basketball, volleyball, softball. I played all of those in high school. You can imagine the area we're from because it is so rural. I mean, I went to school with 300 other people, and that was grades 8 through 12. So there was no difference of, you went from basketball season to volleyball season to softball season. And then if you were in the marching band, there you are on Friday nights at the football game. Everybody did really everything. But sports really played a huge part in high school for me. Loved playing any type of competitive sports. Hate losing. That really always came out, and I tell this, I have 2 daughters that are 5, and they're just getting started in, I wouldn't even call it organized sports. But one of my twins is very competitive, and so just life lessons I try to tell her. It's like, look, mom played on a basketball team, and we won 3 games in about 4 years, and like it was okay. It
Yeah.
was okay. So just, that part of sports has always been a huge part of my life for sure.
So after high school, where did you go to college, and what did you major in, and what did you do during your time there?
Yeah, so I attended the University of Virginia's college at Wise. It was previously called Clinch Valley College, but it's always had an affiliation since the 1950s with the University of Virginia. It was really one of the first public schools within that really far edge of Southwest Virginia. And it was actually founded on a poor farm, which is like a work program for really poor people
Okay.
in the 1930s. I guess those were like it was a government type subsidy. And so there was a university that was founded there. I knew I wanted to stay in state. It was really important for me to stay somewhat close to home. But I went there because that's where I went every summer for basketball camp, volleyball camp. It felt very comfortable. At that time, the university was NAIA, maybe 1,200 students, so very small school feel. And I actually went there to be a history, like I was going to be a history teacher and coach volleyball. This area, is the mountains are great, but I think that the piece of just kind of not having a frame of reference for doing anything in recreation and sports, my frame of reference for being an adult with a job in sports was teaching and coaching.
Yeah.
I hadn't really understood sport management or opportunities to work in recreation. That was really my frame of reference. I want to continue some type of sports, and so history and um, being a volleyball coach was really kind of where I thought my life was going to go, and it didn't.
So what time when you talk about history, what time frame were you interested in?
Oh, I love like the 1920s,
Okay.
1930s.
Yeah.
Did we had to do a junior thesis and a senior thesis. So in one of those, I really like just what happened in World War II in Germany, just Hitler and how things like that come to be, and how do people, just get on a political ideology and they are so loyal, was really fascinating of just World War II and German history. So that and the 1920s absolutely fascinate me, that period in time. So,
Did you get involved with Campus Rec as an undergrad?
yeah, so my story with that, and I worked for a really great guy. His name's Chris Davis. Chris was our assistant director of intramural sports at the time. He also had involvement in outdoor rec and student activities, some responsibilities in orientation. So you can imagine that in a small school like that, he was really doing everything.
Yeah.
And we always called him the fun guy because Chris was always programming for college students. And I started out playing intramural sports, and that was really, even though it was an NAI school, I was still not a good enough of high school athlete to play collegiately, but I still wanted to play sports.
Sure.
And so my cousin's girlfriend was like, "Hey, you want to come play flag football with us?" And I was like, I mean, what do I have to do? Just show up tonight at 7 o'clock up at the intramural field. And absolutely fell in love with playing intramural sports. And that really was my first participation wise. I played everything. We had a very competitive intramural program. I think at that time, 75% of the students at UVA Wise was playing intramurals, and it was so cutthroat and so competitive. I mean, basically, you had established teams, and I think that that's something too about being at a smaller school. It was, I played with some of my high school rivals, but then we would play against our high school rivals from other schools. And I can remember, you know, freshmen are coming onto campus, and we had a thing called the Highland Games, which was kickball and sand volleyball. And the team captains would be out there like scoping out girls to ask to play flag football. Like it was
Yeah.
so competitive. And so I played everything. And then Chris Davis, the fun guy, one day at that time, people referred to me as Kalo. That was my intramural name. Was my initials. And he's like,
Love
hey,
it.
yeah, he was like, "Hey, Kalo," he's like, "Are you work study eligible?" And I was like, "Yeah." He's like, "You want a job for next year?" And I was like, "Doing what?" And he was like, "Oh, officiating, being a supervisor, signing people in." And I was like, yeah, like I would love to do that. And so that's how I got started. I worked for him. And I got to my last semester of school, and I was a super senior, so I was on what my parents referred to as my celebration lap. And I was in teacher ed classes, and I just really I didn't enjoy the teacher education part of it and my student teaching. And Chris Davis one day asked me, he was just like, Carrie, have you ever thought about going in to like campus rec and intramurals? And I was like, well, how does one get a job in campus rec? Like, how do I do it? And so Chris was an alumni of UVA Wise, and he had majored in political science, and he had went to a school called Western Illinois University for his GA position in
Yeah.
campus rec. And it was one of those things. He was like, well, you go, you get a GA. And I was like, what does a GA mean? And so he explained that you could go to grad school and tuition be covered, plus you get a paycheck. And so we looked up, he's like, there's a thing called NERSA. And I was like, I have no idea what this NERSA is. And he's like, oh, there's a conference and they do hiring for GAs. I think we logged on and looked, and the conference was maybe like a week away in Minneapolis. He's like, well, we're not going to go to that. But he's like, I encourage you to apply for grad school. And so I applied at two places. I applied at Western Illinois University and I applied at East Tennessee State University because East Tennessee State was the closest program. And I got a job after I graduated in May at a bank and didn't really enjoy it. And I basically came home one day and told my parents, I think I'm going to move to Illinois. Sight unseen, did not have a GA position. At that point, I had gotten a rejection letter from the associate director letting me know that there were
Yeah.
no GA positions, and I moved anyway. And so my first semester of grad school, I basically made it a mission of I'm going to get a GA position quick as they have one open. I'm
Yeah.
going to get involved, get to know the folks that work there. And by that December, I had a GA position for starting in January as they had a vacancy. So that's how I got started in Campus Rec,
Yeah.
was really just playing intramurals and somebody saying, hey, like, do you have a work study job? No, but I'm eligible. Okay, come work with us. And like learning how somebody gets a job in Campus Rec. Because I don't think you're ever going to find that on a career fair of like, oh, this is your steps to take
Yeah.
to be a Campus Rec professional.
It's exactly accurate. So many of the folks that I know, and I'm sure you do as well, is that it's kind of a similar path. Like they're involved in sports in some capacity, and they kind of get lassoed in some way.
Mm,
And people, like, oh, this is actually pretty cool, or this how do I do this for a living? Like this guy,
yeah. How do I get to be the fun guy?
yeah. And because I did it when I was at Oklahoma State, there was a guy named Kirk Whimberly who was there for a long time. And it's funny is when you and I were talking before this, you know, he made fun of my accent at the time, and he was like, "You're just a good old boy." And so anyway, we formed a bond, and I always thought, like, wouldn't it be cool to be him one day?
Yeah.
And that kind of got me, and I went a little different path, but that got me interested in down that path. So I want to ask about your time at West. So you moved to Western Illinois. You said, sight unseen. You take a leap of faith, and then you start getting involved with campus rec there. So tell me about your experience at Western Illinois, and your time in grad school. What are some of the things you brought with you after grad school that you really enjoyed while you're there?
Yeah, I love that question. So for me, I think the one piece that I tell students, especially now that I'm in a position where I have undergraduate students that are leaving ETSU to go to graduate programs at other schools and they're getting GAs. I've had students go from here to Texas A&M College Station. We've got one at Ole Miss right now. We've had one at Oklahoma State. But I always tell them, like, the one thing I take from grad school with me and I learned was just that I can leave my comfort zone and make it. For me, I had lived in the same area for 23 years of my life and never lived outside of Southwest Virginia, Northeast Tennessee. So that's one of the things that I think really set me up to feel very confident about taking positions elsewhere, starting fresh, starting new, not knowing anyone, learning how to get to know people from different areas, who are different than you and more diverse, than what your background is of growing up on a tobacco farm in Southwest Virginia. But my experience at Western was really starting out in intramurals and more with a marketing piece. That was really my first semester, because roles had already been defined. And then we got a new professional staff supervisor going into the next year. And it was about a week before classes started, and I get a phone call from my new boss who I've never met, and he said, "Hey, the person that in our group of four GAs in intramural sports that was going to oversee the intramural officials was leaving for a full time job and going to leave his GA position." And he said, "Do you want to be over intramural officials?" So I spent the last 2 semesters of my GA experience just working with training officials in different sports. And I can remember one of my first officials training was flag football. And I'm explaining and going through it. And a student raises their hand and he goes, I was like, "Do you have a question?" He's like, "Yeah." He's like, "It's not so much a question, just a statement. But if I have to listen to your accent all year, I don't think I'm going to make it." And I was like, "Okay, well, I can't really change that, but
Right.
like, if you want to find a job somewhere else, there's the door, go for it." But I'm really appreciative of my time at Western. And I too, like, there are academic classes that I still think about. Facility class with Dr. Eric Johnson. I mean, that class was really great. And I even think about some of the things he shared from his experience, in that class about, lawsuits and injuries and things he's dealt with in constructing facilities that actually I did recall that in doing construction projects
Yeah.
and working through things over the years. But I really enjoyed my time at Western, and just the people I met there were really awesome. Really awesome.
Yeah, and that's how we have a connection. That's the one thing that I think about a lot too is just and nothing against the job I had while I was there. I just don't remember a whole lot from the day to day, but there's folks that I keep in contact with that and whether I talk to them a lot or if I just stalk them on Facebook and LinkedIn or whatnot, I keep up with them, and it makes me happy to know that the various people are doing so well. You
Absolutely.
and I both talked. You and I both know Nick White, and I like to give him a hard time. Talking about giving people a hard time, I like to give him a hard time too. But it's just one of those things. Like, when I see those people that I felt were incredibly nice and sincere while I was there, whether it was for fellow students or whether it was staff or faculty, that it was a very endearing time for me as well.
Absolutely. And when I was in it too, there were things that was really like different for me. And just like there were times I was really homesick. But now that it's been so long since we've been at that, I see our GAs that are moving to Northeast Tennessee from places like Massachusetts and Michigan and these Texas and these different states. I see them come in and have that same kind of culture shock of experiencing an entirely new area, an entirely new landscape, new outdoor activities like the hiking we have in East Tennessee, the Appalachian Trail, the rivers, the water sports. And so just watching them absorb that, it makes me really think about my time. And I always tell them, like, it's 4 semesters, but it's going to go by so quickly. And these people that you are going through this experience with, some of these people will become your best friends. They will become people that, you may not check in with every day, but when you have a death in your family or you have a kid and there's these celebratory moments, these will be the folks that reach out to you and will be there for you, even if it is just through Facebook or through social media or through texting. But these are some relationships and memories like you're going to have the rest of your life, no matter if you go into campus rec or you go to a different field. These are the people that's really going to, you're going to spend 2 years together in Northeast Tennessee. And while there'll be times you'll be homesick, it'll be the greatest experience you could possibly have.
Do you ever get back up to Macomb, Illinois?
I haven't been back since my first job was working in Washington at Washington University in St. Louis. So I was about 3.5 hours away. And when I worked there, I went back, I think maybe 2 or 3 times. But I do have dreams of chicks and lips. Like I think about that a lot. I even Googled one time how to make the sauce that goes on those chicken lips, which are like for the people watching this, it's like a really big chicken tender.
Yeah.
They call it chicken lips. But I do dream about that sauce quite frequently.
I went back. It was probably about 4 or 5 years ago at this point, and I got there like on a Thursday, spent Friday, and came home Saturday. But I think I ate there 3 or 4 times in 3 days.
Yeah. Oh, I could do that right now. Like
Yeah.
I just had lunch and I would gladly eat chicks right now for sure. Like love that place.
So
Love
you
seeing.
you mentioned you worked in St. Louis. What did you do there?
So that was my first professional job after grad school. I served as the assistant director of intramurals, and Washington University is a private university. Definitely very different than Western Illinois or UVA wise. It's, very difficult to get into school there. I think I saw a couple days ago on their social media that they had about 30 applicants and admitted 4,000. So the acceptance rate definitely very different. But I worked there doing recreation, but I was out of the athletic department. So that was a really cool experience. Just getting to help out and work different programming. We held the NCAA National Volleyball Championship during my time there. And so just getting to work on events like that was something I had never experienced. And it was really awesome. I had a really great time there. But it's just different when you're around coaches and not programmers. And then you're really one of two programmers in this athletic department.
Yeah.
But that it was a really good experience and I really liked it there. Nothing but great things to say about those folks. I mean, some of the folks that coach there are legends. I remember I had my itinerary for my interview and Coach Fahey, who she is now the head women's coach at the University of Illinois for basketball. And I see her on my itinerary and I Google her and she's like in the Women's Basketball Hall of Fame and her winning percentage is up there with Pat Summitt. And I'm just like, I'm getting ready to sit across from somebody who is so accomplished and so successful. And then same for the men's basketball coach, Mark Edwards. I saw where he was just inducted to the St. Louis Sports Hall of Fame. And I mean, these people are absolute, legends within Division III athletics. And here I am holding space and like sitting at a table next to them. But just watching their work ethic and how they treated people, just phenomenal folks that really, you know, I mean, how they got what they got out of the athletes and their mentorship and their coaching, just phenomenal folks.
And
So,
so yeah, something you said, I think, kind of hit a home run, if you will, using a sports analogy is, treating people the right way. So how long were you there?
I spent 2.5, almost 3 years there, and then I transitioned to Texas A&M Commerce, which is located about 55 miles outside of Dallas.
East of
It's
Dallas.
east of
Yeah.
Dallas. That spent time there. Spent almost 6 years there, and I started out as the assistant director of intramural and club sports. And I worked that position about 3.5 years before working my way up to associate director over programming and staff development. And then from there, I was promoted again to senior associate of construction and special projects. So I worked on, we built a really cool outdoor multi-purpose court. And so that was one of the projects I got to manage from the senior associate role. And then the job came open at ETSU.
Yeah, so let's talk a little bit more about that. So you got the opportunity to move closer to home, or
Yeah.
your old stomping ground. So you're the director there. So tell us, what does a director do? What a director do? What a director does? Yeah. And some of your favorite parts about the job, probably.
So I joke about this with folks, but I literally, like, when the job came open at ETSU, I think I applied on the last day it was open, maybe 3 hours before it closed. It wasn't something, it wasn't one of those situations. I absolutely loved my job at Texas A&M Commerce. I had a really amazing director there, Rick Rosenstengel. He had come from the University of Kansas to a program to be a director. And he had so much knowledge and information, and just we worked so well together. But the job came open, and I was like, oh gosh, am I ready for that next step?
Yeah.
And so just having that conversation with him of what do you wish you knew when you took your first director job, which was here at Commerce? What do I need to be ready for? What are areas in my development that there's deficiencies that I need to improve on to be successful at this next level? But I think I'm going to apply for it. And so I applied and interviewed, and it kind of comes full circle that the dean of students at UVA-Wise my senior year, which was in 2007, left UVA-Wise to move to ETSU. And to have a position here. And he ended up being my supervisor here at ETSU, and I'd been an orientation leader for him. So we went, really way back to Dr. Jeff Howard. And so that piece of, what I thought a director does and what a director actually does, people tell you, and this is something Rick's told me, other directors have told me, is just you really are, it can be a very lonely job because you are at the top of the department. You are overseeing so many different folks, so many different things, and you've got to be ready for that piece of it because you're no longer a colleague down the hallway with a friend across the hallway. You're everyone's supervisor. But I would say, what do I do? I would joke that I go to a lot of meetings, and then I have meetings about the meetings, and then I have another meeting about the meetings. But really, I would say, like, if I had to summarize, what is my job? What am I supposed to be doing? What is my role? And this is something that, when you first start at your first director job in a new department, it's not like I had worked here for years and worked my way up to that role. But it's really about setting the vision of where is the department going. It's evaluating your successes, evaluating your strategies, and then really I view my job as is to provide mentor guidance to the people that are direct reports for me, and really just to encourage us to be better. I think that my job at the end of the day, I own, and I tell this to my staff, I own every decision that they make. At the end of the day, their decision becomes my decision, becomes my AVP's decision, who then becomes my vice president's decision.
Sure.
So I just think that really my job is it's setting the bigger picture, it's celebrating the successes, and it's encouraging us to be better. I do a lot of administrative pieces in terms of signature authority for purchases and signing off on travel. But I think the big picture is this is what our department, this is our vision, this is where we're going, and really holding to that vision.
Mhm.
We want to be, right now we went through that process of changing our mission statement, our vision statement, and we want to be the leader in student engagement on our campus. Okay, well, how are we going to do that? Are we doing that? How do we need to be better? So I would say that's my job and my role.
Yeah.
But it's a lot. It is a lot of meetings. I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. I joke with people like my job is meetings and emails.
Yeah,
Um,
meetings, emails, lots. Lots of proposals, lots of people. And when you are in a directorial, people are looking to you for yes or no answers. People are looking to you for approval, but they're also looking to you for reassurance that what they're doing in their position is right. And hey, am I doing a good job? Do I, feedback? I would say that's a lot of what I do too. And then there's fiscal responsibility of being a director and managing a budget, making sure that people are following university policies, state policy on spending, etc. But I think the bigger picture is just the encouragement, the direction, the reassurance, this is the way we're moving forward.
so I've only got a couple more questions before we close out. I think the next one's the most important one. Is if you could have any job in the world, what would be your dream job?
Oh my gosh.
Yeah,
Oh,
I can
I
tell you
don't.
one of mine is to be just go out fishing every day.
Oh, legit.
Yeah,
I love that. I don't know. I've never really thought of. I told people, this is a funny, side story, and I'll try not to make it too long, but joking with my associate director, Adam Knobloch, he has worked here at ETSU. So when I talk about in that story, right, that I applied to two schools, Western Illinois, ETSU. One day he and I were talking about stories of just kind of like how did we get where we were, and we put together a reverse timeline that if I would have came to ETSU and came over here and harassed the folks to give me a GA position, I would have ended up being Adam's first GA, because of the way our careers lined up.
yeah.
And we went to, when I was in Texas, we went to an intramural symposium, and I see this guy from across the room, and I recognize the ETSU logo. And so I go over to try to get a feel because I wanted to move back to this area, right? So I go over to try to get a feel of, is this guy, what does he do at ETSU? Well, clearly it's intramurals because he's at the symposium. How long is he going to stay at that job? Are they going to have any positions open? Like, I need to go fill it out. And Adam is he's very reserved until you get to know him. So I like come up, I'm like, hey, I'm Kari. I grew up outside of Johnson City. Like, I went to UVA Wise. And he's like, yeah. So like I keep trying to like draw him to like talk with me. And so he and I both remember this interaction. That was in about 2011. I didn't get this position until 2017. And so one day I just confessed to him. I was like, hey, you do remember when we were at Ohio State at that intramural symposium? I was like, yeah, I was trying to be your friend and like see if you were ever going to leave your job. And so I can remember calling my dad and being like, yeah, I met the guy at ETSU, but there's no way I'm going to get a job there. Like, he's not going anywhere. And I judged that based off the fact that he had an accent very similar. I was like, he has to be from around, because he's not giving me any personal information to go on.
Yeah.
But I used to tell him, I told him too, I said that was my dream job was ETSU. And so being the director here, when you asked me that, like if I could do anything else and what my dream job would be, like I think back on that story of me being this person that's just like, I want to work there. And so we had some transition with assistant director of intramural role, and he's at the associate level. And so there was a semester as director I was overseeing and doing the day-to-day of intramural sports. And Adam comes by my office and he was like, you remember at Ohio State when you thought you wanted the intramural job at ETSU? Guess you finally got it. And just like turns around and walks out of my office. And I was like, touche. Like, yeah, like I now have that job that I always wanted. But I would say too, dream job, I would love to be a lawyer.
Oh yeah.
I wanted, yeah, like I wanted to go to law school, but at the point of my celebration lap, I think I was just like, yeah, that's too long to be in school.
Sure.
But I love policies. I love rules. I love like a good interpretation of, well, what does this rule mean?
Yeah.
I can see that.
I think there's parts of it that I could see being a lot of fun is having to, I don't know if debate's the right word, but kind of work through some of those problems when there's no, sometimes when
Yeah.
there's rules but it's not a clear answer. you know
Yeah, it's like, what's the interpretation of this? Well,
yeah.
what, I could see that. I could also see, like, I would love just like if I could make a career out of it, just being like an usher at a Major League Baseball stadium. Like, like if that paid what, a survivable, like I would love to show up to Major League Baseball games and direct people to their seats. Like,
And this was
come down here. Oh, no, if you're in the wrong section. Like, I would love that. That'd be a great job.
I was telling somebody not too long ago that I'd like to mow grass.
Yeah.
You know,
You ever turf?
yeah,
Heck yeah. Heck yeah.
and just
Absolutely.
put on some good tunes and just go with it.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
Carrie, before I let you go, the last question I have is if somebody's watching this, or if they've followed your career path, outside of this, I guess, but if they're sitting there going, you know what, she is so darn cool. I like the way like she went about this, or I really like how she was intentional here, and it kind of all these different things. But you look back and you say, hey, what are some tips you can give to folks, or things you wish you'd have done or done differently? What are some tips you can give to a young professional or student looking to go in a similar career path?
Oh, I love that. I have a lot, so I'll try to be concise with it. I think one of the things, and I tell this, and I talked about it a little bit about watching now graduate assistants come into our department from different places. I think so many times we as people are always thinking about and looking to what's next. And I think sometimes we forget to be in the moment and really try to take advantage of every opportunity that we have, even the ones that we know are temporary. I think when I look back, there are things like even I think about in undergrad, and I think, for the college students that may watch this, I wish I would have been more involved in campus life. I wish I would have ran for student government. I wish I would have like done different things other than just play intramurals, work in intramurals, and be in a sorority. But I think that so many times we're thinking about what's next, we forget to take advantage of the opportunities around us, the area we're living in, going to, I think about my time in Macomb. I went to Chicago one time, and it's like you're going to be here for only 2 years and you go to Chicago once,
Yeah.
and so things like that of not always looking ahead of, hey, there's something better next. Like, how can I make the most out of where I'm at? I think other advice is really just finding people. I think you need two things. I think you need mentors, but you also need sponsors. And I think the difference is mentors are people who are going to work with you every day. They're going to grow, they're going to develop you, they're going to tell you when you need to be better at things. But then there's folks who are also sponsors, and sponsors are those people who are nominating you for awards. They're the people that are telling other people how great you are at your job. And you need some of those folks in your corner. I think about Rick and my time at Commerce and him as the director. He was definitely a mentor, but he was always a sponsor. He was always looking for opportunities for me to work on higher level projects than I thought I was able to handle. When he says, hey, you're in on managing this construction project, and I'm like, but I've never done a construction project. But him saying, but Kari, you're organized, you are on top of things, you love deadlines, you like picking out, like, and so it's like, you can do this and I'm here
Yeah.
to help you. But I think that that's an important part of who's your sponsors that are going to go out and say, hey, this person's great, you need to hire them, or hey, this person's great, they need this experience, they want to be on your committee. And I think the other thing, and like there, as a fitness, wellness, recreational professional, I think there's like that fine line of, and especially with the younger generation, I think our generation was at that cusp of, we worked a ridiculous amount of hours and we were a part of kind of the old system of like you have to pay your dues, right? Like you've got to work. Oh, you have to be here till 10 o'clock at night, like, and you
Yeah.
came in at 10 a.m. Like, nah, like that's what you do to pay your dues. So I think that that's one of those important balances though for people is going into this field, like you have to work hard to move up and you can't give up. That's one of the things that I see we lose a lot of people in this industry, um, whether it's because they get stagnant or it's like, I'm not progressing as fast as I want to. I want to move up to a higher level. But I think it's just about like, are you working and taking advantage of every opportunity? Because if you start signing up, helping out, staying late. Eventually, you move up into that role because everybody views you as that person that gets it done and can make it happen. Um,
I wrote down Carrie loves deadlines.
I do love a good deadline. I love to be organized. Love, for me, I think that that's one of the things too I've learned, and I know that this is going on a little bit longer than of an answer, but one of the things is like I did a presentation with my current supervisor, Dr. Sam Mayhew, and we talked about expectation and clarity, and it was called Clarity is Kindness. But how many times do we get projects and it's like, oh, we'll just get this done? And it's like, well, when do you need it by? Oh, we'll just work on it. And you're like, people can't meet your expectations if you're not like, hey, I need this by Friday at 5 o'clock because
Right.
I have a meeting Monday at 8 a.m. But I think that that's one of those pieces. If you leave things open ended, people have no idea what you want. If it's like, oh yeah, I just need it in an Excel sheet. And some people's like, okay, I can take that. Other people are like, wait, do you want columns? Do you want the columns this way or this? But I think like that piece of it, if you don't tell people what you want, they can never meet your expectations.
That's right.
That goes with deadlines.
Yeah, no, I think that's exactly right. And on the student side of it, with my students, is I said deadlines aren't necessarily for me. It helps me keep organized, so I don't have a million things to grade at once, right? But
Yeah.
more than anything, it's about setting expectations and you working to meet expectations.
Yes.
I try not to assign like quote unquote busy work, but it is some of that is same with like put in APA style formation and citations stuff, right? I'm like, when you get out in the real world, I don't know if anybody's going to check your APA citation, but it's more about like putting in the work to make sure that it looks good.
Yeah. And
And
I love that because I think that that's real life. And that's the other thing just about working and working in a workplace that, I think back on grad school and I mean, we had this marketing proposal we had to do for Dr. Young's class in grad school that was like 56 pages long. And it was the most intense, like, people that were in that marketing class, if you hadn't taken it yet, you were like dreading, like, I don't want to be in that marketing class. I don't want to have to do this marketing proposal. But it's real life that, when we went through COVID and closing our facility and then reopening in August, I had to put together a reopening plan. And I'd been working on it, but I got notification on Wednesday that it was due not to just my supervisor, but to the president, the executive council, and the COVID medical team. And that's on a Wednesday, and that had to be turned in by Friday. And so it's real life in terms of, when you're doing coursework, staying up on things, because if you do go into a recreation field, you still have the cycle of this is what the annual pieces look like. This is our fiscal year. This is our annual cycle. These are the annual events we have every year at this time. And you kind of know how to stay on track.
yeah,
But I think you learn that as a college student from your coursework. And college professors are much more forgiving than assistant vice presidents for you missing deadlines. I will give you that, Dr. Bradley. That college professors are much more understanding than what it's like at work. But
I
you
had
want
somebody just the other day that I forget what it was, a baloney excuse. And I said, I called him out. I said, "You're giving me a baloney excuse, and I'm going to give you a little bit of flexibility. But I want you to know that I know it's baloney. And in the real world,
yeah,
you might have just gotten fired,
yeah, absolutely,
you know." And,
absolutely.
and anyway, so I know we're running long. I know you've probably got much better things to do than keep gabbing with me. So I sincerely appreciate you taking the time to meet with me today and letting me pester your questions. It's always interesting to learn a little bit about folks, even though you think you still know them. And as always, if you need anything, definitely always feel welcome to reach out and give me a shout.
Thank you so much.
All right. Have a great day, Kari.
You too.
Bye bye.